Look, I'm not saying the Galactic Council is run by paranoid control freaks, but when your standard security screening involves literally reading someone's mind, you might want to reconsider your trust issues. Welcome to the year 2247, where humanity finally got invited to the big kids' table of intergalactic politics and immediately discovered that every other species in the galaxy thinks privacy is a quaint little concept for primitive civilizations. Commander Vex Thornblade, human diplomat and the poor soul at the center of our story, sat in the waiting area of the Galactic Council Security Bureau, watching a holographic fish swim lazy circles in a tank that didn't actually exist. He'd been waiting for 45 minutes, which apparently was fast by galactic standards. The receptionist, a floating orb of condensed energy that may or may not have been sentient, had assured him 3 times that someone would be with him shortly. In space, nobody can hear you sigh with bureaucratic frustration. Vex was 32, built like someone who went to the gym specifically to complain about going to the gym, and possessed the kind of confident smirk that suggested he'd never met a situation he couldn't talk his way out of. His dark hair was regulation short, his uniform was regulation crisp, and his attitude was regulation cocky. Earth had sent him to the Galactic Council because he was diplomatic, charismatic, and, most importantly, because everyone else had the good sense to say no. The door finally slid open with a hiss that sounded judgmental, and a 4-armed insectoid being shuffled in with all the enthusiasm of someone calculating exactly how many minutes until retirement. This was Quindle, senior thought-scanning technician, whose chitinous exoskeleton had the dull sheen of someone who'd stopped caring about polish around the same time they stopped caring about life. Commander Thornblade? Quindle's voice emanated from somewhere in his thorax, translated into English by the universal implant every council species wore. It sounded vaguely British and extremely tired. "That's me," Vex said, standing and extending a hand before remembering that most aliens found the human handshake either confusing or vaguely threatening. He converted the gesture into an awkward wave. Quindle didn't acknowledge it. "Follow me. Standard telepathic verification scan. Procedure takes 30 seconds. Do not resist. Do not think aggressive thoughts. Do not plan planetary invasion during scanning. Questions? Just one. What happens if I do plan a planetary invasion? We arrest you. And if I'm not planning one, but I think about planning one hypothetically?" Quindle's compound eyes somehow managed to convey the exact expression of someone realizing their shift should have ended 10 minutes ago. "We arrest you for being annoying. This way." The scanning room looked like someone had asked an AI to design a dentist's office crossed with a spaceship bridge, then gave up halfway through. The centerpiece was a chair that looked comfortable until you realized it had restraints, surrounded by a circular array of crystalline sensors that hummed with a frequency just below hearing. The whole setup glowed with that particular shade of blue that screamed, "Definitely safe technology, trust us." "Sit," Quindle commanded, manipulating controls with 3 arms while using the 4th to scratch what might have been his equivalent of a back. Scanning process reads surface-level thoughts, verifies identity, confirms you are not enemy infiltrator or philosophical threat to galactic peace. Standard for all new species joining Council. "Right, because Thought Police is totally not an Orwellian nightmare," Vex muttered, settling into the chair. "What is Orwellian?" "Never mind. How many humans have you scanned?" "You are number 1. Vex blinked. "I'm the first human you've scanned?" "All humans. You are first human to undergo procedure. Congratulations on being guinea pig." "That's not as reassuring as you think it is." Quindle shrugged with 2 of his shoulders. "Machine has scanned 4,732 different species. 1 more makes no difference. Human brain is brain. Brain has thoughts. Machine reads thoughts. Simple. Except, as it turned out, human brains hadn't gotten the memo about simple. Quindle pressed a button with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this exact procedure roughly 10,000 times and expected absolutely nothing interesting to happen. The crystalline sensors began to glow brighter, and a soft melodic tone filled the room, the kind of sound designed by committee to be universally calming and instead just made you wonder if you were about to be abducted. "Clearing your mind now," Quindle intoned. "Thinking of nothing, letting thoughts flow naturally like peaceful stream. Vex tried. He genuinely tried. He closed his eyes and attempted to achieve the zen-like state of mental emptiness that apparently every other species in the galaxy could manage without breaking a sweat. Unfortunately, trying to think of nothing immediately made him think about thinking of nothing, which made him think about whether thinking about thinking of nothing counted as something, which reminded him of that philosophy class in college, which reminded him he still owed Professor Martinez $20, which reminded him he needed to check his email, which reminded him of that embarrassing typo in his last report where autocorrect had changed diplomatic mission to diplomatic mansion. The scanner's hum shifted from melodic to slightly concerned. "You are thinking very loud," Quindle observed, mandibles clicking in what might have been confusion. "I'm not trying to," Vex said. "I'm trying to do the peaceful stream thing." "You are doing opposite of peaceful stream. You are doing a chaotic waterfall of random nonsense." "Well, that's just hurtful." The scanner's hum escalated to a whine. Several of the displays surrounding them began showing readouts that made Quindle's antennae twitch. Numbers scrolled past faster than should be possible. Graphs spiked and dipped like they were recording seismic activity. One monitor just displayed a question mark, which seemed like poor programming. "This is, unexpected," Quindle muttered, tapping controls with increasing urgency. "You are experiencing multiple simultaneous thought streams? I mean, isn't everyone?" "No, definitely no. All species have one consciousness stream. Linear, orderly. You have, scanning indicates 7 distinct thought processes occurring simultaneously." "That sounds about right, yeah." "That is not right. That is deeply wrong. That is concerning on fundamental level." Vex opened his eyes. "Look, I don't know what to tell you. I'm thinking about this conversation, wondering if I locked my quarters this morning, trying to remember the lyrics to that song that's been stuck in my head for 3 days, debating whether I should have had breakfast, worrying that this scan is going weird, planning what I'm going to say in my report, and also there's this random montage of every embarrassing thing I've ever said playing on loop in the background. Standard human experience." Quindle stared at him with all 6 eyes. "That sounds like psychological disorder." "It's literally just consciousness, buddy." The scanner decided at that moment to start making a noise that no piece of advanced technology should ever make, a sort of grinding whir that suggested internal components were having philosophical disagreements about their continued structural integrity. Smoke wasn't exactly billowing from the machinery, but there was definitely a suspicious haze gathering near the primary sensor array. "Okay, this is not normal," Quindle said, which was the kind of statement that never preceded good news. "Should I be worried?" Vex asked. "Should I be worried is question I am asking. You should be, continuing to sit very still." "That's not actually answering my question." "Continuing to sit very still now, please." One of the monitors exploded. Not dramatically, just a sad little pop and a shower of sparks like the universe was trying to provide special effects on a budget. The scanner's hum had now escalated to what could only be described as a mechanical scream, and the peaceful blue glow had shifted through concerned purple and was rapidly approaching panic red. Quindle's 4 arms flew across the controls in patterns that suggested he'd moved from standard operation to desperate improvisation. "You need to stop thinking," he commanded. "I literally cannot do that. That's not how brains work." "Then think quieter." "Also not how brains work." "Then think about one thing. Just one thing. Pick something boring. Focus all consciousness on single boring thought." Vex tried. He focused on a white wall. A blank, empty, boring white wall. Nothing else. Just wall. Plain wall. White wall. Except now he was thinking about whether it was ivory white or eggshell white, and did it matter? And who decided to name a color after eggshells anyway? And now he was thinking about eggs and whether chickens ever wondered why humans ate their eggs. And that was a weird thought, which made him think about other weird thoughts. And suddenly he was mentally composing a philosophical treatise on breakfast foods while simultaneously humming the chorus to a pop song from the 2190s. And remembering that time in 3rd grade when he tripped during a school play. The scanner started sparking in earnest. Okay, we are having problem, Quindle announced, which was the understatement of the millennium. I am calling supervisor. You stay. Do not move. Try very hard not to think. You keep saying that like it's possible. But Quindle was already scrambling for the emergency communicator, all forearms gesticulating wildly as he explained the situation to someone on the other end in a language that sounded like aggressive wind chimes. Vex remained in the chair, watching smoke curl from the scanning equipment, and couldn't help but think that his first major diplomatic assignment for humanity was going spectacularly wrong. Also, he was pretty sure he'd left the stove on back on Earth. That thought, of course, just added itself to the mental playlist of anxiety. And somewhere deep in the scanner's processing core, a circuit board quietly gave up on life. The supervisor arrived in a gelatinous rush, literally oozing through the doorway with the kind of determined speed that only comes from years of dealing with bureaucratic emergencies. Morpheus Gell was a Glumorian, which meant he looked like someone had tried to create a slug out of sentient jelly and then given it anxiety about proper procedure. His translucent blue body rippled with what might have been concern or might have been lunch, it was hard to tell. Explain situation, Morpheus demanded, his voice emanating from somewhere in his central mass and carrying the crisp authority of middle management everywhere. Quindle gestured frantically at the smoking scanner. Human consciousness is too loud. Machine cannot process. Have attempted standard calming protocols. All failed. He is thinking approximately 7 things simultaneously. 7? Morpheus's body rippled with what was definitely shock. That is impossible. Maximum recorded simultaneous thought streams for any known species is 2, and that was considered profound neurological abnormality. Yes, well, human seems to think 7 is normal Tuesday. It is a Wednesday, Vex interjected helpfully. Not helping, Quindle snapped. Morpheus undulated closer to the scanner's controls, extruding a pseudopod to manipulate the holographic interface. His gelatinous face, if you could call it that, somehow managed to convey the expression of someone reading very bad news. Scanning matrix is overloaded. Neural pattern recognition algorithm has crashed. 3 separate processors are attempting to categorize single thought that appears to be, reading here, simultaneous memory of song lyrics, calculation of lunch options, and internal debate about, and I am quoting directly, whether hot dogs are sandwiches. They're tacos, Vex said. If you fold the bread, it's a taco format, not a sandwich format. Please stop talking, Morpheus said. Please stop thinking. Please stop existing for a moment if possible. I'm getting a lot of mixed signals about this whole scanning process. The scanner made a noise like a cat being strangled by another, smaller cat. More smoke emerged from somewhere in its crystalline core. The readouts were now displaying what appeared to be fragments of Vex's consciousness in real time, and it was deeply chaotic. One screen showed a grocery list. Another displayed what looked like a fantasy conversation, where Vex told his commanding officer exactly what he thought about the requisition approval process. A third was playing a memory of a beach vacation from 6 years ago, complete with the sensory data about how sand gets everywhere and is terrible. This is unprecedented, Morpheus muttered, his gelatinous body quivering with what might have been scientific fascination or existential dread. Human neural activity is operating on multiple parallel tracks. It is not sequential processing, it is, concurrent chaos. That's basically the human condition, Vex agreed. It is defying all established models of consciousness. All known sentient species process thoughts linearly. One thought, then next thought, then next thought. Clean, orderly, efficient. Humans appear to be processing, scanning indicates, everything simultaneously, all at once, forever. Yeah, it's exhausting. Trust me. Another monitor flickered and died. The scanner's hum had reached a pitch that was making everyone's teeth itch, assuming everyone present had teeth, which was not a given. Quindle was frantically trying to initiate shutdown protocols, but the machine seemed to have developed its own opinions about continuing to operate. Why is it not shutting down? Morpheus demanded. It is trying to finish the scan, Quindle said, mandibles clicking with stress. Machine is programmed to complete verification process. It does not understand that human brain is, unverifiable. Override it. Use emergency shutdown. Have tried. Machine is not accepting override. It is, I believe technical term is, very confused and somewhat angry about it. It was at this moment that Vex's brain, helpfully trying to remain calm, decided to review every embarrassing social interaction he'd ever had. The scanner, attempting to process this sudden influx of socially awkward memories, began cycling through them on the displays. There was 13-year-old Vex waving at someone who was waving at the person behind him. There was 17-year-old Vex calling his teacher mom. There was 23-year-old Vex saying you too when a waiter said enjoy your meal. Oh, come on, Vex groaned. We're really doing this? We're broadcasting my greatest hits of humiliation. Machine is attempting to categorize threat level, Morpheus explained, watching the memories cycle past with fascination. It is confused why you are remembering these moments. It is trying to determine if this is intelligence gathering or psychological warfare. It's neither. It's just what brains do. They randomly assault you with every terrible thing you've ever done when you're trying to sleep or apparently when you're being telepathically scanned by alien technology. The scanner's AI, if it could be called that, seemed to interpret this explanation as further evidence of complexity. It began pulling up more memories, more thoughts, more of the endless internal monologue that characterized human consciousness. A song started playing on one monitor, except it was just the chorus on repeat because that's the only part Vex actually knew. Another screen showed a mental argument he was having with himself about whether he needed new shoes. A third displayed a complex calculation about how many days until the weekend, followed immediately by the realization that in space weekends were arbitrary constructs. This is fascinating and terrible, Morpheus breathed, and coming from a sentient blob of anxiety jelly that meant something. The scanner began to shudder. The crystalline sensors cracked, and somewhere deep in its processing core, something that sounded expensive made a very final clicking sound. Uh-oh, Quindle said. That did not sound like good, uh-oh, Vex observed. Is not good, uh-oh, Quindle confirmed. That was sound of primary psionic relay surrendering to inevitability. I think scanner is about to... The scanner exploded. Well, exploded was dramatic. It more sort of gave up and released all its stored energy in a sudden pulse of telepathic broadcasting that rippled out through the building like someone had just turned on a PA system directly into everyone's brain. And broadcast through that pulse in crystalline clarity was every single thought currently running through Commander Vex Thornblade's very loud, very human mind. The pulse hit the Galactic Council headquarters like a psychic tsunami, except instead of water, it was one human's unfiltered stream of consciousness. And instead of causing physical damage, it caused something arguably worse. Profound existential discomfort across multiple species. In Conference Room 7, the celestial delegation, 3 beings of pure enlightenment who communicated through elevated wisdom and had achieved perfect mental clarity after 10,000 years of meditation, simultaneously twitched. Their serene expressions cracked. One of them, Elder Seraphim Brightmind, actually said a word that translated roughly to, "What the actual heck?" which for a species that hadn't experienced surprise in 4 millennia was frankly shocking. In the cafeteria, a hive mind species called the Collective, whose entire civilization operated on perfect synchronization between millions of drones, suddenly found themselves out of sync. One drone started humming the chorus to "Don't Stop Believin'," which immediately infected 17 others. 3 drones began debating hot dog taxonomy. Chaos reigned. Back in the scanning room, Morpheus was attempting damage control, by which I mean he was panicking in 3 different shades of blue. Shut it down. Shut it all down. Cut power to entire building if necessary. Cannot shut down, Quindle wailed. Broadcasting is coming from human, not machine. Machine is just amplifier. Human is source. Vex, still strapped in the chair, was experiencing the unique horror of realizing that his every thought was currently being broadcast to what was essentially an entire office building full of telepaths. His internal monologue, which had previously been a private hellscape, was now a public exhibition. "Can everyone hear me thinking?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," Morpheus and Quindle said in unison. Can I stop? No, they said again in unison. Well, this is just fantastic. The door burst open with enough force to suggest whoever was behind it had opinions about subtlety, and those opinions were negative. Ambassador Krell Stonefist stomped in, all 7 feet of crystalline warrior fury, his rocky exterior glowing with irritation. The Letharians were a species that had evolved from sentient minerals and had approximately 0 patience for what they called squishy biological nonsense. Which one of you soft matter life forms? Krell rumbled, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. Is broadcasting mental static about whether cereal is soup? That would be me, Vex said weakly. And for the record, it's not soup. It's a beverage with particulates. I was in strategic military planning session. Very important discussion about border security. And suddenly my thoughts are interrupted by extensive internal debate about breakfast foods. Do you understand how this makes me look to my subordinates? Deeply relatable? Krell's crystalline face somehow managed to convey that if looks could kill, there would be a human-shaped scorch mark on the wall. This is unacceptable. I demand you stop thinking immediately. You're like the 5th person to tell me that, and it's still not how brains work. More council members were arriving now, drawn by the commotion and the fact that their own thoughts were being drowned out by someone else's mental noise. A floating jellyfish-like being drifted in, its bioluminescent organs flashing in distress. A tripedal reptilian diplomat scuttled through the door, hissing in irritation. Even the energy beings, who didn't technically have bodies and therefore shouldn't have been affected, manifested as crackling orbs of barely contained annoyance. Can someone explain, the jellyfish being pulsed in translated light patterns, why I am experiencing second-hand anxiety about whether the human left his stove on? I do not have stove. I do not have concept of stove. And yet now I am worried about stove. He is broadcasting, Morpheus explained miserably, scanner overloaded on human neural patterns. Instead of reading, it is now transmitting. All of his thoughts. To everyone. Forever. Not forever, Quindle corrected. Until he stops thinking or brain runs out of blood or building achieves nuclear meltdown, whichever comes first. Those are all terrible options, Vex said, and then immediately thought about how that was a terrible thing to say, which was broadcast to everyone, which made him think about thinking, which created a feedback loop of self-consciousness that rippled out through the building's telepathic field. Somewhere on the 3rd floor, a meditation instructor achieved enlightenment accidentally, and then immediately lost it when they absorbed Vex's running commentary about whether anyone actually likes the taste of coffee, or if it's just socially acceptable caffeine addiction. This is disaster, Morpheus moaned. We must contain this. We must call emergency meeting. We must call someone who knows what to do because I definitely do not know what to do. Call Professor Wavelength, Krell commanded. If anyone can solve this biological catastrophe, it is her. Professor Wavelength is currently in deep research, Quindle said. She does not like to be disturbed. Building is experiencing psychic contamination from overly loud human thoughts. I think she will make exception. A new voice cut through the chaos, calm and precise and carrying the particular authority of someone who had multiple doctorates and wasn't afraid to use them. No need to call. I am already here, and might I say, this is absolutely fascinating. Professor Nimbus Wavelength materialized in the doorway, if materialized was the right word. She was a luminar, a species of photonic beings who existed as sentient light, and she currently appeared as a vaguely humanoid shape of swirling rainbow brilliance. Her enthusiasm was palpable and deeply worrying. Fascinating? Krell repeated. This is not fascinating, this is psychic terrorism. Tomato, Nimbus said cheerfully, drifting into the room and beginning to scan Vex with instruments that appeared out of thin air. Do you realize what we have here? This is first documented case of parallel processing organic consciousness. This human is running multiple cognitive streams simultaneously. It is revolutionary. It is giving me migraine. the jellyfish being pulsed weakly. Small price for scientific breakthrough, Nimbus said, not looking up from her instruments. Tell me, Commander Thornblade, is this normal for your species? Yeah, pretty much, Vex said. I mean, some people are better at focusing than others, but everyone's got the internal monologue running over time. Internal monologue, plural? Definitely plural. Nimbus's light form pulsed with excitement. This explains so much about human cultural development. Your species went from primitive agriculture to spaceflight in, what, 10,000 years? More like 12,000, but who's counting? Most species take 100,000 years minimum. We assumed you were outliers. Statistical anomaly. But this parallel processing, this explains everything. You are not thinking faster. You are thinking more simultaneously. Multiple problems, multiple solutions all at once. Sure, Vex said, and also multiple anxieties, multiple regrets, and multiple embarrassing memories playing on loop. Yes, evolutionary trade-off. Very human, very loud, very, very loud. Nimbus turned to address the room. I believe I can solve this, but first I need to run some tests. Tests? Morpheus quivered with alarm. How long will tests take? Oh, couple hours, maybe days. Depends on cooperation, and also whether buildings' telepathic dampeners can be retrofitted for human brain patterns. In Vex's mind, a new thought crystallized with perfect clarity. He was going to be stuck in this chair, broadcasting every random neural firing to an entire building full of increasingly annoyed aliens, for potentially days. That thought was, of course, immediately broadcast to everyone. The collective groan that echoed through the telepathic field was unanimous and crossed all species boundaries. 3 hours later, the scanning room had transformed into something between a laboratory and a disaster relief center. Professor Wavelength had set up enough equipment to make a particle physicist jealous, all of it humming with purpose while monitoring every aspect of Vex's neurological activity. Morpheus had stopped quivering and started taking detailed notes, his scientific curiosity finally overriding his bureaucratic panic. Quindle had given up entirely and was in the corner having what appeared to be an existential crisis about his career choices. Ambassador Krell had remained mostly because he refused to admit that a human's thoughts had driven him from the room and was now standing with his arms crossed, emanating judgment in crystalline form. This is remarkable, Nimbus announced for the 17th time, her photonic form pulsing with colors that suggested she was having the best day of her academic career. Look at these readings. Commander Thornblade's neural activity is not just parallel, it is fractally recursive. He is thinking about his thoughts about his thoughts. It is consciousness all the way down. It is deeply annoying all the way down, Krell muttered. But functionally brilliant, Nimbus continued, ignoring him. Do you see pattern here? Human brain is not operating on single processing thread like every other known species. It is operating on multiple simultaneous threads, each one interacting with others, creating complex emergent behaviors. Morpheus oozed closer to the display. What is evolutionary advantage of this? Seems inefficient. Seems like it would cause constant mental chaos. Because it does cause constant mental chaos, Vex confirmed. Welcome to being human. It's a nightmare. We invented meditation and therapy and 8 different types of anxiety medication just to cope with our own brains. Yes, but look at results, Nimbus said, pulling up a holographic comparison chart. Here is timeline of technological development across known species. See how most species follow similar curve? Slow, steady, predictable advancement over hundreds of thousands of years. Very orderly, very logical. And humans? Krell asked, though his tone suggested he already knew he wasn't going to like the answer. Humans are vertical line, practically straight up, from stone tools to quantum computing in evolutionary blink. Because while other species think through problems step by step, humans are thinking about problem from 7 different angles simultaneously. Some thoughts are wrong, yes. Some thoughts are ridiculous, absolutely. But some thoughts are revolutionary. And they happen in parallel with grocery lists and song lyrics. She pulled up another display, this one showing the current state of Vex's mind. It was chaos incarnate, multiple streams of thought flowing simultaneously, worry about the scanning process, curiosity about Professor Wavelength's equipment, lingering concern about that stove, a random memory about his first day of astronaut training, a mental note to email his mom, the continuing hot dog debate, and a background process running the chorus to a song he didn't even like. "This should not work," Morpheus said, staring at the display. "This should be cognitive overload. This should cause complete mental breakdown." "And yet humans are functional," Nimbus said. "Messy, yes. Chaotic, absolutely. But functional. And more than functional, they are creative, innovative, unpredictable. Your species, Commander, is essentially running multiple probability simulations simultaneously. Most of Galaxy is playing chess. You are playing 7 games of chess at once, while also doing Sudoku and planning dinner. That's actually a pretty accurate description of human consciousness," Vex admitted. Krell's crystalline features shifted into something that might have been grudging respect. "I still do not like it, but I am beginning to understand it. This is why humans are so difficult to predict in negotiations. You are not following single logical thread. You are following multiple threads, and we cannot tell which one you will act on." "Exactly," Nimbus said. "And this is why thought scanning fails. Scanner is designed for species with single consciousness stream, clean input, clean output. But human brain is providing multiple simultaneous inputs, many of them contradictory, none of them clean. Scanner cannot process this. It is like trying to listen to 7 radio stations at once and expecting to understand single coherent message." "So what do we do?" Morpheus asked. "We cannot admit species to council without security clearance. We cannot provide security clearance without thought scanning. We cannot thought scan humans without, apparently, causing massive equipment failure and psychic contamination of surrounding area." Nimbus's light form swirled thoughtfully. "We adapt. Scanner is designed for galactic standard consciousness. Humans are not galactic standard. They are galactic outlier. So we either redesign Scanner, which would take years and might still fail, or we acknowledge that humans cannot be scanned using conventional methods." "That is security risk," Krell said. "Is it though?" Nimbus countered. "Think about it. We have just spent 3 hours inside Commander Thornblade's unfiltered consciousness. We have seen his every thought, his every worry, his every random neural firing. Have we discovered secret invasion plans? Hidden hostile intent? Anything that suggests threat to galactic peace? We have discovered that he is deeply concerned about whether he left stove on," Morpheus said, "and that he owes Professor Martinez $20, Quindle added from the corner. "And that he has very strong opinions about breakfast food taxonomy," Krell grumbled. "Exactly," Nimbus said triumphantly. "We have seen complete unfiltered human consciousness at its loudest and most chaotic. And what we found is, well, mundane biological concerns and somewhat obsessive overthinking. If this is what humans are hiding, then they are not hiding anything dangerous. Just deeply, deeply weird." Vex wasn't sure if he should be insulted or relieved. He settled for both. "So your professional recommendation," Morpheus said slowly, "is that humans... My professional recommendation is that humans think too loud to hide anything effectively. Any species whose consciousness naturally broadcasts on all frequencies simultaneously is not capable of covert hostile intent. They are barely capable of covert any intent. They are essentially walking transparency protocols, just very noisy ones." Krell considered this. His crystalline form rotated slightly, which was apparently how Letharians showed they were thinking. "This is most backward security clearance I have ever witnessed. We are approving them because we cannot read their thoughts, and we trust them because when we did read thoughts, they were too ridiculous to be threatening. Galactic Council has built entire system on telepathic verification," Nimbus said. "System works well for 99% of species, but humans are different. They require different approach, and fortunately humans have long history with different approach. They call it trust and verify." "Trust and verify," Morpheus repeated, "without telepathy. They use behavioral observation, pattern analysis, verbal testimony, old-fashioned investigation, primitive methods, but effective. Humans reached space using these methods. Perhaps we can use them too, just for this one very loud species. The room fell silent, except for the humming of equipment and the ongoing broadcast of Vex's thoughts, which were currently cycling through relief that this might actually work out, worry that it might not, and a random tangent about whether the cafeteria had any good sandwiches or tacos or whatever hot dogs were classified as. Finally, Krell spoke. I am military strategist. I appreciate order. I value predictability. Humans are neither orderly nor predictable. This makes them problematic. He paused. But any species whose weapon is accidentally thinking too loud about their anxieties is not hiding invasion fleet. I approve exemption. Morpheus quivered, which was how Glumorians nodded. I will draft new security protocol for humans. Special category. Thought scanning exempt, subject to alternative verification methods. This will set precedent. But, well, precedents must start somewhere. Wonderful, Nimbus said, already beginning to pack up her equipment. I am writing 17 papers about this, also requesting regular access to human subjects for cognitive research. This is most exciting discovery of my career. Happy to help science, Vex said weakly, still strapped in the chair and very much hoping someone would remember to actually turn off the broadcasting equipment at some point. 2 hours and one complete system shutdown later, Vex was finally freed from the chair. The telepathic broadcasting had ceased. His thoughts were once again his own private chaos. The building's resident telepaths had been given the rest of the day off to recover, several with prescriptions for what was essentially the psychic equivalent of aspirin. Morpheus had drafted a new protocol in record time, motivated primarily by the desire to never experience this situation again. The document was already being circulated through council channels, and Vex had been assured that no other human would ever have to undergo standard thought scanning. They'd invented an entire new category just for humanity. Species classification, weird but harmless. It is not official title, Morpheus explained, oozing alongside Vex as they walked toward the exit. Official title is Alternative Cognitive Architecture Species, but everyone will call you weird but harmless. Already I have heard 3 diplomats using this term. I'll take it, Vex said. Better than species that breaks expensive equipment with their brains. That was alternative suggestion. It did not pass committee. They reached the main atrium, where Ambassador Krell was waiting with what appeared to be an official datapad and an unofficial expression of someone who had reached the acceptance stage of grief. Commander Thornblade, Krell rumbled. On behalf of Galactic Council Security Bureau, I am authorizing your security clearance through alternative verification methods. He thrust the datapad forward. You will undergo quarterly behavioral reviews, submit to verbal interviews, and maintain open communication logs. This is compromise. Do not make us regret compromise. I'll do my best, Vex said, taking the datapad. Though I should warn you, human behavior is almost as chaotic as human thoughts. I am aware. I have read preliminary reports on your species. You have invented something called practical jokes and something else called reality television. I am not optimistic, but I am hopeful you will at least be entertaining failures rather than boring ones. That's the most backhanded compliment I've ever received from a sentient rock, and I appreciate it. Krell's expression might have been a smile, though on a Litharian, it looked more like geological shifting. You are cleared for diplomatic duties, Commander. Try not to break anything else. We have limited budget for equipment replacement. Professor Wavelength drifted over, still radiating enthusiasm. Before you go, Commander, I must ask, how are you feeling? Any lingering effects from extended telepathic broadcast? Vex considered. His head felt fine. His thoughts were still running on 7 different tracks simultaneously, but that was normal. The only real difference was that now he was hyper-aware of his own mental chaos, which meant he was thinking about thinking, which was a recursion loop he'd probably be stuck in for days. I'm okay, he said finally, though I'm definitely going to be self-conscious about my internal monologue for a while, knowing that an entire building full of aliens heard me mentally debate breakfast food philosophy is not great for the confidence. If it helps, your arguments were surprisingly well-reasoned, Nimbus said. I am now uncertain about my own classification of hot dogs, and I do not even eat solid matter. That does help, actually, thank you. Quindle emerged from the scanning room, looking like someone who had aged several years in the span of a few hours. His chitinous plates were dull, his antennae drooped, and he moved with the energy of someone reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. "Human is cleared to leave?" he asked weakly. "Human is cleared," Morpheus confirmed. "Good. Am taking vacation. Am taking long vacation. Am going to planet with no telepathy, no scanning equipment, and no humans. Will return when I have recovered from trauma." He shuffled toward the exit, muttering something in his native language that the translators wisely chose not to interpret. "I feel bad about that," Vex said, watching him go. "Do not feel bad," Morpheus said. "Quindle has been requesting transfer for 3 years. You have given him excellent reason for stress leave and possible career change. In way, you have helped him. That's a generous interpretation. I am generous blob of administrative support. Is my job." Vex glanced at the datapad again, skimming through his new security clearance. It was extensive, thorough, and completely lacking in the telepathic verification that every other species had to undergo. Humanity had managed to get exempted from standard procedure, not through diplomacy or negotiation, but by being so fundamentally weird that the galaxy's security systems couldn't process them. It was, he reflected, the most human way possible to achieve special status. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Do I report back to Earth? File an incident report? Explain to my superiors that I accidentally became a test case for interspecies cognitive psychology?" "You continue your diplomatic assignment," Krell said. "You attend meetings. You represent your species. You try very hard not to think so loud that you disturb our telepaths. Standard diplomatic duties. And if other humans come to the council, they will undergo new protocol," Morpheus said. "Interview-based verification. No thought scanning. We have learned lesson about human brains and expensive equipment. Lesson was expensive. How expensive are we talking? 60,000 credits for scanner replacement, 15,000 for telepathic dampener repairs, 3,000 for counseling services for affected telepaths, and 1 priceless loss of innocence for Quindle's career satisfaction." Vex winced. "Earth is definitely going to hear about this." "Oh, entire galaxy will hear about this," Nimbus said cheerfully. "I am publishing findings in Journal of Xenoneurology. Title is tentatively Parallel Processing Consciousness in Homo sapiens, when one brain equals 7 thoughts. It will be very popular. Humans will be famous. Famous for breaking stuff with our minds. Great. That's exactly the reputation we want." "Could be worse," Krell observed. "Could be famous for breaking stuff with your bodies. I have seen human compilation videos. You are remarkably fragile and yet remarkably determined to test those limits. You've been watching fail videos? Research. Important to understand potential allies. Conclusion is that humans are simultaneously durable and delicate, which makes no sense but appears to be consistent pattern. Welcome to humanity. We don't make sense, but we're consistent about it." Morpheus rippled with what might have been amusement. "You should go, Commander. File your reports, rest, prepare for tomorrow's diplomatic sessions, and perhaps, if possible, practice thinking quieter. I'll add it to my mental to-do list, which I'm sure will help tremendously." That was sarcasm? That was definitely sarcasm. Ah, human communication style. Will note in file. Vex shook hands with Morpheus, which involved touching a pseudopod that felt like firm jelly and was exactly as weird as it sounds. He nodded to Krell, who returned the gesture with the gravitas of someone who had survived a battle and wasn't entirely sure they'd won. He waved to Professor Wavelength, who was already back to analyzing data and muttering excitedly about neural plasticity, and then he walked out of the Galactic Council Security Bureau, his thoughts still running on multiple tracks simultaneously, his internal monologue providing running commentary about the whole experience, and a small part of his brain already composing the absolutely insane report he was going to have to file when he got back to his quarters. The human race had officially joined the galactic community. And they'd done it by being too loud, too chaotic, and too fundamentally weird for standard procedure. Which, when Vex thought about it, was probably the most human thing they could have done. As he stepped out into the artificial sunlight of the council station's main plaza, watching dozens of alien species going about their business, he couldn't help but smile. Somewhere in the building behind him, a thought scanner was being decommissioned and possibly given a burial with honors. Somewhere else, Quindle was booking tickets to the quietest planet in the galaxy. And somewhere in the administrative offices, Morpheus was drafting protocol changes that would affect every human who ever visited the council headquarters. All because one human's brain had been too loud. Vex's internal monologue started composing a message to his family back on Earth. Something about how he'd made history today, though probably not the kind anyone expected. Then another part of his brain reminded him he still needed lunch. A third part wondered if the station's food courts had hot dogs, which led to another tangent about whether hot dogs were sandwiches, which he immediately shut down because he'd subjected the galaxy to that debate quite enough for one day. His comm device beeped. A message from Earth Command, probably asking for a status update. He'd reply later. Right now, he had to find food check if he'd actually left the stove on back home. Spoiler alert, he definitely hadn't, but his brain wouldn't let it go. And maybe, just maybe, find a quiet place to sit and let his thoughts run their chaotic course in peace. Behind him, the Galactic Council continued its work, processing the revelation that humanity was officially the loudest species in the galaxy, and somehow, that was going to be okay. In space, everyone could hear you think, and if you were human, they really, really wished they couldn't.